I'm not sure if we're starting yet, to be honest. Are we starting?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good. I'm Greg Kutsona, and I want to welcome you to Science, Race, and Faith Insights from Hispanic Congregations. I'm co director of Science for the Church and a lecturer in comparative religion and humanities at Chico State University. It's been one of the serendipities of the past year to have met Reverend Dr. Edgardo Rosado, pastor, scholar, community leader, and from what I've heard, a rockin' electric bass player. Reverend Dr. Rosado provides us at Science for the Church and, of course, the wider world, honestly, fresh insights on connecting faith and science for Hispanic Christians, who, by some estimates, are number 45 million in the United States. He's associate project director at Esperanza's Science and Faith Initiative and adjunct professor at Nazarene Bible College, visiting scholar at European Nazarene College, executive pastor with the Church of Nazarene in Media, Pennsylvania. He holds a PhD and an MA in pastoral leadership and a BA in biblical studies, all from the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico. So, Edgardo, it's going to be really fun to talk with you.
Yeah, likewise. I've been looking forward to this conversation, to this time together, even in a virtual space. Feel a true kinship with you, and I'm glad that we have this time, to come together, and the technology that allows us to share and talk about these important subjects, even if there's a whole bunch of miles between us. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, I mean, our friendship has been nurtured all the way through COVID. We have never been in the same
Yeah.
room together, but I feel like I really know you well, and that you are a partner in this work of faith and science. So, there's a first part I want to ask about because it's in the title, right? Hispanic congregation. So, you could help, I think, many of us unfold the terms Latinx, Latino, and Hispanic, which have some different emphasis. One on the place of origin, one on the language that's spoken, and so maybe tell us about those terms as we talk about the context for this conversation of faith and science.
Sure. I think that I don't know, in kind of a strange way, the nomenclature, all those words that you were talking about, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, they're kind of interchangeably to refer or to talk about a group of people that have a common bond of the Spanish language behind them. Uh, Different differences, regional differences, and many other aspects are thrown into the mix to kind of complicate the issue. And you didn't even use one of the other terms that is used, which will be like Afro Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
also englobates or brings together Hispanics that are of an African heritage, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and even the Lesser Antilles to a bigger extent. I think that within the social sciences and the world of anthropology, the term Latinx has been kind of coined to talk about or to refer about this wide group of people with cultural differences, with regional differences, in an attempt to approach the whole Hispanic world and the New World from the standpoint of social justice, and to help bring the plight and the issues and the problems and the difficulties that the Latinx people experience, and to study it from an academic perspective. So
Right.
yeah, one of our latest conversations, or not one of our latest conversations, but one of our ongoing conversations was surrounding the preference between Latinx and Hispanic. And if you remember, a year ago or a little bit more than a year ago, lost track of time, started the conversation using, talking about my preference of using Hispanic. But the more I work in the social justice and social sciences and humanities side of this mayhem or this business, the more I have become attuned or accustomed to use the term Latinx to talk to about the issues and the pressures and all the things that go behind that. Yes.
All right. Well, we'll go with Latinx as our primary word, adjective, and maybe we'll slip in, or I'll slip in Hispanic and Latino from time
Yeah.
to time. So I'll just say a little bit about my biography and how I come to this conversation. Then I want to hear about yours as well. So one of the things for me is that, as I said, and as you know, Edgardo, I co-direct the organization Science for the Church with Drew Rick Miller. And we bring scientific resources to Christian congregations. So if anybody's interested in that, you're always welcome to go to scienceforthechurch.org and find more. The reason I got into this is that I served, after I finished a PhD in science and theology, I've served as a pastor in 1996 till today in various different forms. Past 6 years, I've not been serving a congregation like full-time, but I've been actually serving the university in my town, Chico State University, teaching in religion and humanities. And one of the things that I find really important about this faith and science conversation is that so many people today are rejecting Christian faith because they think it is not compatible with science. And that's particularly true of a younger demographic, especially the well-known 18 to 30-year-olds, emerging adults that are disaffiliating from the church or becoming not religiously affiliated, or the nuns. So I'm really interested in that side of things. And also, one of the things that Drew and I have discovered as we've done projects and initiatives with congregations is that when these congregations do their work, often pairing a scientist and a pastor or a Christian leader in bringing faith and science, that the congregation grows not only in understanding science, but in their faith and in their vibrancy of faith. So we believe this is really something, meaning the conversation of faith and science, is really important for the church. Now, one of the things, though, that we've discovered, and one of the reasons why this conversation today, Ed, is so important, is we recognize that often the conversation it hasn't felt very diverse. We'll just look at the diversity in terms of race and ethnicity. And it's felt like an extra conversation and in some ways. So oftentimes I'll say I do faith and science work, and somebody will say, well, I don't think I'm really smart enough for that. And part of that, I think, comes from this conversation doesn't often feel like it's landed for people. It doesn't feel like it's a real life issue. And I think part of the reason to broaden this conversation is to make sure it lands in various contexts, and particularly, as we talk today, in the context of the Latinx church. So I know you're going to have a lot more to say about that, but I want to ask you first about your bio and how you got interested in the connection of Christian faith and science.
That is kind of a long story, I born and raised in Puerto Rico to a Christian family. I always felt a deep interest, kind of spurred by my dad. He always pushed me and my brother, study and study, and if you have more time, please continue studying. That was kind of the marching order in our household. So we all paid attention to that, and we're glad about that today. From the onset, I had a keen interest in becoming a medical doctor. Once I finished high school, that was next steps for me. Going to a pre-med program and start preparing or taking the next steps to fulfill that dream. In the midst of all that, I felt God calling me into ministry, which was kind of kind of a curveball that God kind of threw into my plans. So I did not finish pre-med. I kind of left the program, I think, with 4 or 5 classes left, almost, but not quite there. And kind of went into an exploration of what God wanted me to do. So I ended up completing a whole different undergrad in Bible and theology, a master's of arts in pastoral leadership, and my PhD is in actual theology with a focus on research focus on John Wesley's Christology as an instrument of social change. How can we use faith, our belief in Christ, to change our context, our community today, not as an eschatological hope or something that will happen one of these days, but how can we insert ourselves as people of faith to bring about transformation that is rooted in the love of God, the love of Christ, the love of neighbor, and rooted in God's justice and equity for all. Science never left my interest. It just kind of became a hobby on the side. So, seeing how theology and my faith was enriched, and my understanding and vision of how God works in the world was amplified by understanding the confluence or the commonality, the coming together of both science and faith as windows of being able to interpret and understand how God reveals Himself into our world. So that's kind of who I am academically. I've worked as a pastor for, oh my goodness, 22 years, give or take, within the Church of the Nazarene, pastoring multicultural congregations, both in Philadelphia, Colorado, Puerto Rico, Washington, D.C., and kind of coming back full circle to the Philadelphia area, Philadelphia region, and kind of immersing myself kind of in the academic side of things, and also in the social work arena or field as it relates to making a better community for the Latinx community that lives in Philadelphia, which coincidentally is another interest of mine as I do postdoctoral work and research how the dynamics of being next person living in an economically depressed community affects the likelihood of being able to fulfill their dreams of higher education. So that's my next dissertation.
Well, and your next PhD, I think, right? Aren't you getting a second PhD in that?
Glutton for punishment, I think. That's what my wife calls me.
Well, I have a friend who's a German scholar, and they'll go with the Reverend Doctor. So next time I introduce you, perhaps it'll be the Reverend Doctor Edgardo Rosado.
Oh God. That's going to be something.
Just keep doing that. I mean, we can go with as many doctors as you want. So one of the things that I think is fascinating, obviously it's fascinating that when we talk about, Latinx, Hispanic, these aren't just designations that talk about, the origin of the area or the language spoken, but like you said, there are social justice components, and particularly as Christians, when we look at the world around us, social justice is incredibly important. I'm going to venture, just put my toe into Wesleyan theology and say that Wesley was such an amazing combination of ethics and theology, and also engaging in his time with the natural science, or the natural philosophy as it was called, of his day. So he's really an amazing example for what you do. But I'm getting a little off track. I wanted to ask you about this Latinx church. And of course, this could be a dissertation question itself. But can you just help sketch, for those who are listening, some of the ways that Latinx Christians in the United States are, identify themselves as Protestants, as Pentecostals, as evangelicals, as Catholics? How does that give contours to this, large demographic of about 45 million people in the United States?
Yeah, that is a question and a half. It is a hard question. It is a hard question to answer and to give precise statistical analysis of that. I cannot speak for the United States at large, but I can speak more clearly about our contextual work here in Philadelphia through Esperanza.
Right.
Our constituency, the Latinx community in Philadelphia, I think that kind of falls into two large groups. You have a large contingent of Latinx people that are Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can talk about the sociological aspects of why that is going all the way back to the discovery and the conquest and the evangelization process of Spain that Spain brought to the New World, and how that has taken a hold in the Latinx idiosyncrasy and culture. So you will have a large number of Latinx people that will identify as Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are practicing, some of them are not. They were baptized as children, they were confirmed, and this is the ancestral faith that were given by their parents. So they identify as Catholic, although may not be a practicing Catholic at this point. But the other side of this coin, at least for the Philadelphia region, is it's a large number of Latinx Christians identifying as some form of Pentecostal, be it Assemblies of God or an independent, loosely affiliated to the Pentecostal movement type of a group. So we have in our network, and I'm talking about the city per se. I'm not talking about the tri-state region. I'm talking about the urban lines of demarcation of the city. We have about 180 clergy, and I would say that 90% of our clergy is Pentecostal. We have a little bit of United Methodist clergy, United Methodist Church clergy. I think one or two Baptists, and man, I think that there's two crazy Nazarene Hispanic pastors within the city, and I'm one of them.
Yeah, you're
So
50%
yes,
of that demographic, right?
I am 50% of the Latinx Nazarene clergy demographic. Yes, indeed. So yeah, it's it's hard to ascertain because the Latinx is simply not a monolith in itself. It's like every other group you will have. You will have a wide palette of colors and tastes and nuances, nuanced approaches to faith, even within the Hispanic group. And we can widen that circle and take it to other faiths that faith approach or faith traditions that fall out of what we would consider Christian faiths, and you will find some of those as well.
Yeah. So just to repeat, you said there's a large majority of Pentecostals in this group of 180 that you relate to. So, this will probably be old news from some listeners, but that the Pentecostal movement, starting largely in the early 1900s as a particular movement, it emphasizes the gifts of the Spirit that are given in Acts 2 in Pentecost, speaking in tongues, prophecy, healing, and so on. And so often, again, not to generalize and stereotype, but there are some trends with that theology that say, well, the world of Christianity is the world of, or the importance of Christianity is in the Spirit, and not as much in what we see, but what by our eyes, what we see by faith.
Sure.
And there are particularities about bringing the connection with faith and science to that community. That's one thing. And the second thing I think that we've talked about is just as a point of context in the Latinx churches and congregations that you're part of. you may not have the paid seminary trained pastor, doing every function that might be commonplace for, again, some of our listeners. Like I personally have been in some multi-staff churches, so we had relatively lots of ordained or trained people on staff. So that's another part of this. And then the third part is, as you spoke about right at the beginning, you've got some very particular social needs, and needs that are present to the community. So I often give this example, like understanding quantum physics and quantum entanglement, and the way, what's causation in quantum physics, and how does that relate to I don't know, prayer and God's work in our life. That is not going to be as important as how is God connecting with me through medical science, for example. Or I'd love to give this example, and then I'll let you talk. There is a question in here somewhere. How Esperanza said, people can get vaccinated for COVID in downtown, as I understand it. I'm in Philadelphia, but your community wasn't close to downtown. It was like an hour and a half bus ride, right? So even though it was technically free, getting time off of work, taking that bus ride, getting childcare, whatever, that was a huge barrier. So you actually opened up a clinic to vaccinate people in your community. And to me, that's a faith and science thing. I guess what I'm trying to make it land is those are the kinds of issues that are important in some of the congregations that you face. In other words, very practical life issues, and then connecting that with some of the theology, which has a different angle on how to bring faith and science together. So I suppose that's just sort of a smorgasbord of options. Pick one off the table that you want to respond to and comment on.
Yeah, you have like seven. If there was ever a compounded question, I think that was it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see how I can tackle this. The federal government, and this kind of speaks to the issue of social justice and living in an economically deprived or depressed community. The federal government established, in conjunction with the city of Philadelphia, established a vaccination center in downtown Philadelphia. There's public transportation, and you can take a car and drive it down Broad Street and then make a left onto Market Street, and you're there. The convention center is there. Geographical distance is not like a huge distance, but because of the congestion and all other issues, it will take you a while to get from where we are located, from where the vast majority of the Latinx community is located in Philadelphia, to get to that vaccination center. And to make matters worse, as in any urban environment, you can take a car down there and you can park. And you will have to wait, 10 hours before you are served. And at a rate of at least $18 an hour for parking, that will it's just simply not an option for a family that doesn't have that kind of an income. We were vaccinating vast numbers of people, to the point that Philadelphia is on target with the numbers that the president set forth by July 4th. We are there already, but not among brown and black faces. So our CEO and founder, Reverend Luis Cortez, along with our vice presidents, started to advocate these issues. You have a vaccination center, but it is not accessible to our community. And through a intentional campaign of advocacy and social pressure, Philadelphia became the only major urban center that had two community vaccination centers. Esperanza, we're not a medical clinic or health provider in any way, shape, or form. We are a social entity from faith-based perspective to effect social change. That's whom we are. But we became a vaccination center. So FEMA and the city of Philadelphia took over our parking lot, and we began a massive campaign to bring in the Latinx community to be vaccinated. It was right in the neighborhood. They could just take a walk if they were, within walking distance, or come and park around our sprawling facilities for free, and be serviced and be vaccinated. So that kind of addressed the issue, of this social disparity, and the inability of some of our people have to work 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet. One of the particular issues within Latinx families is that everybody works. Children that are of age are expected to pitch in. It is part of how things are done within a Latinx family, to be able to keep the head above water.
Right.
Battling against all these issues becomes difficult. And we are convinced, not that I think, we are convinced that this is one of the most important dynamics of the Science, Faith, and Hope, Ciencia, Fe y Esperanza project. One of our marching orders, one of our deliverables. This is ours. It's not the funders' deliverable per se. This is our desire, is to inspire young people to see science as a calling, as a vocation, service to God and to their community. To come and see the possibility of entering the field of science, of technology, and engineering as something that is attainable for them, so they can become educated, so that they can become the ones that are moving the advancements in science and technology forward, so they can come and advocate for the community, so the community can become their place for us, and for everybody that lives within our boundaries. And that's one of the most important things that we see as part of this project.
That's great. I'm wondering if I'm getting that moment of internet access. So let me see. What? Let me ask you if you can hear me on this. Can you tell a little bit about the survey that you did with your community and the idea of the interdependency or the concept of science?
Uh, kind of harkening back to something you mentioned about, the underpinnings of some of the theological positions that are present within our Latinx community. Uh, uh,
So I'm not sure to those who are listening, if you all
I'm back. I'm back up.
Okay, I think I'm back too. And we're on the broadcast. Excellent. Good.
Excellent.
You know, it's funny. Every time I teach in a church on science and faith, the technology breaks down. So this is incredibly important for us, I think, as a as a sign that
Murphy's Law, or you're jinxing the whole thing. I'm not sure which one is which.
one of the two, right? Exactly. So, Edgardo, I think we got a lot of what you had just said, but do you want to summarize in a sentence or two, just in case? Because I have another topic I'd love to turn to.
I think that the last thing that I was talking about is the that at Esperanza we believe, we firmly believe in the importance of moving forward with our project, with the Science, Faith, and Hope project, the Ciencia, Fe y Esperanza, because we want to instill in our young people the deep-seated belief that pursuing a career in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is within their grasps, and they can come to see it not just as a career move, but also as a vocational move. Like responding or answering God's call for their lives, so they can become part of the movers and shakers of this technological and scientific wave that is coming our way. So instead of being, their jobs being affected, their future careers being affected by the changes, they are the ones leading the change, and then they can become, or they can find themselves in a better position to bring about a great revival and transformation within our community, and make it a better place to live. Move the community from a place of scarcity, and move it to a place of abundance and beauty and social connectedness and abundance of resources everywhere we go. We were trying to affect that change through our social engagements and scientific engagements as well. I think that was the last thing I was talking about.
Yeah, I mean that touches my heart so deeply. I believe that whenever we are baptized and/or confess Christ, we are sent out in mission, and so we need to look at the church as the church sent, the church in mission, right? And so one of those mission fields is science and technology, and a part of that for us at Science for the Church has been to help churches to see how do pastors and Christian leaders nurture their congregation, the young part of the congregation, to go into science and technology, and how do we help continue to disciple scientists and technologists in our congregations. And the diversity side of this is, as I don't need to state it because I know you're familiar with it, but just to say it, I think it's worth always reminding ourselves the representation of people from the Latinx community, from the Black community, and so on, is lower in science than the white community. And so as churches, we can really be a part of this, which I think is incredibly important. So amen to this work. I thought we'd have a little fun, though. Can we have a little bit of theological fun? So, I'm trained as a Reformed Presbyterian pastor in the Calvinist tradition. You're a theologian in the Nazarene tradition. So I thought we'd just talk for the next section about how do our traditions address this faith and science work, right? So for me, part of what we lean on in the broad Reformed tradition is, of course, the sovereignty of God and the emphasis on God as creator. So God is not only revealed in Scripture, which is central, Scripture alone, sola scriptura, is so important to us. Sola scriptura is where we find everything we need to know for faith and salvation. But we also recognize that God speaks in Revelation through creation as creator. And that's not only the first book, the book of God in Scripture, but the book of God, as it's said, in creation. And we want to make sure that we always learn from creation. And the reason I mention that second book that God has written is that that's where scientists so often help us understand God's speaking, as it were. So God is the sole author of these two books. They don't contradict. once again, we find salvation in Jesus Christ through the Scripture. We also find complementary insights from science. So that's one of the ways I, as a Reformed theologian, look at it. And I know that you've talked about drawing, I believe it's from James, the book of James, that every good and perfect gift comes from God, right? And that things like scientific advances and new technologies and our understanding of how we're made, like neurotheology, neuroscience, these are things that guide us as Christians to see this as a gift from God. So so my particular question, I'm going to try to be more precise this time. My particular question is, as a Nazarene theologian, how do you come, and pastor, how do you come to this topic of faith and science?
Yeah, one of the things that really challenged me while I was working on my doctoral dissertation was the realization that Wesley was had a fundamentally different view of what a Christian ought to do and how a Christian ought to behave or conduct him or herself towards the rest of humanity. And I think he kind of boiled it down uh, to two fundamental areas. The first one will be works of piety, and the second one is and this approach
Can
stems
you say
right
the
out
second one
of
again? I didn't hear the second one, Edgar. I'm sorry.
mercy
Mercy.
is the
Okay.
second one. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and they kind of stem out of his understanding of what living a holy life was all about. It was encapsulated in the Great Commandment. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Ergo, the works of piety are the works that mark or sustain our love towards God. It's spiritual discipline practices. It's praying and feeding in the Word of God. Not forsaking the assembly of the brethren, participating of the sacraments, and living in that connection with community of faith as to sustain our pursuit of a deeper relationship with God. And the second is an outgrowth of the first one. Works of piety inevitably, as you search God with all your heart and with all your mind in Wesley's conception, this will lead you to the second one, which is the works of mercy. Which the best way to describe it is Matthew 25 type of stuff. Because I was naked and you clothed me, and I was hungry and you fed me, and I was thirsty and I was in jail. I was sick, and you tended to the needs, the present and physical needs of those that are around you. That's kind of how Wesley understood the whole thing. This is what the Bible says, but this is how we ought to live out what the Bible says. Um, to the point that Wesley embarked in an intellectual pursuit to learn all he could about medicine, so he could actually help the destitute, the poor, the people that were indentured slaves, the people that the crown nor the church was interested in engaging with them. He said, "Hey, we are here to love God by loving these people. Ergo, we ought to do everything in our power. So let's put our pennies together so we can buy medicine for the people that need medicine. Let's learn all we can so we can make the latest technological and scientific and medical advances available to this mass of people that have no way of engaging with that." So and again, I'm a weird Nazarene because I think that I'm at this point I'm more Wesleyan than Nazarene because of my academic and intellectual pursuits. So some of my Nazarenes may not be in full agreement with what I say. I think that that should be our marching orders from from a theological vintage point of the Nazarene Church today, yes, we are still called to understand that the Bible is central. It's the one that reveals God to us and allow us to understand whom God is. But also, there's the other sphere of this understanding God, which pushes us to color outside of that line and do whatever it takes, be it scientific pursuit, intellectual pursuit, understanding better the world around us so we can create systems that support the needs of the least of these. I think that that's written in the Bible somewhere. I cannot remember where. It's a biblical mandate,
Yeah, right.
for the least of these. So, we ought to do those things um, as our service to God and as our service to our fellow man.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I know you did some surveying of your local churches, and particularly on this question of interdependency and confluence of faith and science. I think we didn't get to that question with a technological breakdown. So, what were some of the statistics that came out of your survey of the community that you're in and how people view faith and science?
Yeah, let me preface my presentation of our statistical analysis by saying that we started the project right in the middle of the lockdown orders of the pandemic. So our intention was to go, door to door, visiting pastors. In If you're familiar with Philadelphia, you know that in the world of row homes, you're going to find a whole bunch of storefront churches that are small in nature, very local, minister to that those surrounding blocks. And we were interested in knowing what this clergy and these congregations had to say about the whole conversation. But because we were forced to shift from a face-to-face approach to a virtual approach, our survey was conducted virtually. So the people that we were able, the clergy that we were able to reach, were the clergy that were already technologically savvy, and we're a little bit more, educated than, and what I mean is, that they had, BAs and MAs. And are not the typical pastor within the geographical zone that we serve. Um, so our data is kind of tainted, and I don't mean tainted in a bad way. It's colored in such a way that reflects the unique subsegment of the population that we were able to reach through our sampling. So that particular sampling showed some very interesting data. One of the questions that we asked was, precisely that relationship between science and faith, and we were kind of surprised to know or to learn that 50% of all the clergy that responded to our survey reported that religion is central to all science. And what they were saying is that our understanding of God, our theological understanding, has a large part on how we understand science and theology. So that means that we accept science when it's not in conflict with our doctrinal or theological or faith positions. So that is really important, because part of the battle is already fought and won. 50% of the pastors understand that science is in essence a gift from God and needs to be applied. Every good and perfect gift comes from God, as James declared. And out of that, 20% expressed that religion is central to some of the science. So kind of drawing that distinction even further. Kind of speaking of yeah, science, it has some beneficial aspects, but by and large, most of scientific inquiry, it's kind of juxtaposed to our faith. and only 17% understood that they are at war. No correlation whatsoever. They are two separate entities, two separate worlds, different ends of the spectrum, and they never cross paths or coexist. Uh, out of that survey, we also ask if faith and medical and scientific advances, kind of trying to ascertain if our Hispanic or Latinx clergy was open to the idea that once a COVID-19 vaccine was available, all of this is pre COVID-19 vaccine. It's just at the onset. Once a vaccine is available, if our parishioners and our clergy were going to be inclined to participate in a massive vaccination effort. And at that point, we came to find out that 50%. 50% of our clergy said that, yeah, those scientific advances are compatible sometimes, which kind of correlates to some of the hesitancy that we kind of see on the flip side of where we find ourselves today. Yeah, we were able to establish a community vaccination center. Yes, we were able to move a significant amount of Latinx of the Latinx community to be vaccinated against COVID-19. But there were that 50% that there were always this lingering question and lingering doubt behind the more fantastic approaches that we have seen lately attached to the COVID-19 vaccination. Buying fully into I don't know, stuff like there's a chip in the vaccine, ergo we're not going to be vaccinated. Stuff like it is the mark of the beast, so we cannot be vaccinated. And sadly, some of that is being pushed from our pulpits. So yeah,
Right. Yeah.
our it's an interesting statistical analysis. But it gives us some hope because at least we thought that the divergence, the disconnection, the juxtaposition was going to be larger. So we have an opening within our clergy community and our Latinx Christian community that is open to some of the sciences. I guess that the rest is education. It's providing safe spaces where we can talk about it and present resources that talk about this from a Christian perspective, and giving them the opportunity to vent out in a trusted space, and to hear from trusted voices that we can trust in the gifts that God has given us.
Yeah, yeah, which is so important. And one of the things I want to draw out here is, what is the message for the church? In my work as a pastor, in the work with Science for the Church, we really want Christians in congregations to hear that science is a gift from God, and to learn from the scientists in their congregation that they have relationships with. And that science, following that, is really broad, right? There are a lot of times we focus on particular hot button issues. We haven't gotten into evolution and creation, which of course is one that comes up a lot. But what does science tell us about the soul is another one. And yet, I think what COVID has demonstrated is these great scientific resources we have in our congregations and in the community, they can help people in the pews to see that science can be beneficial. So that's a positive. And we all are facing some of the misinformation that's coming forward, the mark of the beast stuff, the chip that's the microchip that's put into the vaccine. I mean, for goodness sake, why do you need a microchip in the vaccine when these phones tell us where we are?
One that tracks you everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I appreciate you said there's some good news in there, which is, as Christian leaders, we can help our congregations and connect with other Christian leaders to see the value of science. do you have any other words for the church that come out of what you just said, or for other things
Sure.
in your experience?
As you were the one of the position papers were written by an upcoming epidemiologist and biologist that we engaged to our project. Unbeknownst to us, this we knew the lady was a lady of faith, Dr. Don Shell. What we didn't know, she was actually a youth pastor. So she
No,
had
wow,
both.
yeah.
She spent both sides of our project, the theological side and the scientific side. So she created a paper that was, at least for me, from the theological message to the church. The message of hope to the church was outstanding. And I used some of her framework to kind of create a document that we're putting together to distribute to our local churches in the hopes of creating a positive message of God's desire for his community today. And it was enthroned in the idea, or rooted in the idea, that God has already endowed us, you and I, people of faith, people that approach us with the intellect, with the capacity, and with the knowledge to approach whatever needs are in our community. So we only need to trust in God and follow the plan that He has already established. And it's the idea that kind of jumps out of Leviticus, as God commanded people to deal with leprosy, which was an infectious, deadly disease. He separated a group of people. The priest, go and talk to the priest, because I have given them instructions on how to deal with this particular issue. And as you dealt with them, as you go and you deal with them, you will find the answer to your problem. And if you trace those instructions all the way back to the New Testament, when Jesus encountered the 10 lepers, Jesus did not heal them miraculously like sometimes he did. He just hearkened back to, this is what God said already. So go and show yourselves to the priest. And as they trusted in God, as they trusted God instructions, as they moved in the direction that God already had established, they were healed.
Mm.
Some people focus on, hey, only one of them lepers came back, and yeah, only one came back, but all of them were healed. Why? Because they complied with God's instructions. They did what God asked them to do. And the same thing kind of rings true for us today. As we trust in the things that God has provided for us, the tools He has given us, we're made in His image, and that is that relates to our capacity of thinking critically, of understanding our world, and harnessing the things that God has provided for us to provide answers to our quandaries and our problems. So as we trust God's eternal truth and God's eternal message, we will find the answers for our problems. And that is, I think that is an outstanding approach to how God deals with us today.
Oh, preacher brother, I love it. I love it.
Ah,
I
I
recognize that
forgot
you're
about
also a
preacher for a
preacher.
second. Yeah,
I think.
forgot that for a second. I'm sorry.
Oh, no need to. I love it. That's great. Let me just say we've got a few more minutes we're going to be talking, but I wanted to point out that we have a newsletter that Science for the Church just did this week with you, Ed. And so if anybody wants to look at that, who's listening, just go to scienceforthechurch.org, and you can go to on the blog, and you'll find more of Edgardo's insights with some resources as well. I think what you just said was so good, and such a hopeful message. I mean, I have to be honest. As a pastor, my pastoral heart, as it were, is always on. It's like I have concern for my congregation, or my people that I love and care for. That so often they're misunderstanding the value that science can be. particularly with COVID. We have, particularly in this country, we have such leaders, international leaders that we can draw on, and many of those, like Francis Collins, are Christians, right? Are people of
Hmm.
faith, of deep faith, and so my pastoral heart comes out whenever I think about how do we connect science with our Christian faith. Um, and one of the things that I want to keep emphasizing is, you know, um, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's a way of community development, and I think we see that across the church that many times Christians are underrepresented in these fields, but particularly, of course, in Latinx communities. I say, of course, because these statistics are widely discussed, at least in the circles I run in. We need to make sure we encourage people to go into STEM, but also I think, this idea of providing an additional window into God, that science provides an additional window into who God is. I should go back a step. And what you just talked about also, that science and God's healing can come through science, right? I think we both are willing to say God can heal directly. That's the power we see in Jesus. And yet most of the time it's through science and technology that in modern medicine that we find healing today. But I do want to get to that topic. You've done some interesting work with neurotheology, right? And that was one of, in this great conference, I believe that was the right title for an event you had last
Hmm.
fall. You had some neurotheology come in, this understanding of how we're designed in our through neuroscience, how neuroscience sees us, and what that tells us about God. So, can you tell us a little bit about how that came in? This idea of neurotheology. It sounds very esoteric, and yet it lands really well too, right?
Yeah, it is funny that you refer to it as esoteric before, right before coming into this space. I was doing another presentation to our staff, and I was discussing neurotheology, and I was talking about, for some people may sound esoteric in nature, so we're just kind of the same wavelength, and looking at it from kind of the same perspective, because there's kind of a disconnection between neurotheology and theology as an instrument of faith, and doctrine, and reflection, or reflecting on God, and what He wants us to do. One of our experts, Reverend Dr. Carmelo Santos, his space, he has a dual space, biology, with a real scholastic and academic interest in neurotheology, and theology per se. So he wrote a paper that addresses the issue, and one of the things that he speaks about is the fact that neurotheology is a way of helping us understand that, the reference of the psalmist, the creation, the heavens, the things that we see around us declare the glory of God. But he says there's more to this idea than just looking outside of our physical beings, because as we look inward to how our brains function, there is where we can actually see the glory of God in its full manifestation, and God's imprint, the imago Dei, fully functioning in our beings. Things like in Genesis, where God speaks about of you and I, and the rest of humanity being made in the image and in the likeness of God. And as we move to Colossians chapter 2 and verse 9, where the writer speaks about the fact that the fullness of God, the wholeness of God, the fullness of His deity indwells our body. Those are mind concepts. They defy our conception of physicality, and how God can do that. And Dr. Carmelo Santos speaks about the fact that psychologists and neurologists um, have been able to empirically prove and empirically see how our brains function in terms of that spiritual connection. When we think deep spiritual thoughts, when we are engaged in prayer, in substantive prayer, there are specific areas in our brains that kind of light up that otherwise would not light up. They have been able to study how the amygdala, the hypothalamus, and the hippocampus is affected by these deeper spiritual connections, to the point that we speak of a God spot in our brains. That place where we are, I don't know, is it Wi-Fi or hardwired? Not, however, we are connected with that esoteric aspect that we kind of move out of our bodies and enter in and connect have been able to prove empirically that there are some aspects of our being that truly behave in a different way when we are connected with God in this way. Even people that suffer epileptic seizures. I'm sorry, especially epilepsy that is located in the frontal cortex. When they are having these episodes, they report these deeply uh, meaningful spiritual travels or episodes or experiences that stem out of this apparent dysfunction of the brain. So we are interested in exploring that connection because most people will say, nah, we don't even want to know that, because we go back to the Bible doesn't speak about that, ergo we need not to concern ourselves with it. But harkening back, to your idea of science as an additional window in our edifice of God's manifestation to us, His creation, and giving us a deeper understanding or a deeper view of this world. I think that that's exactly what a neurotheology does for us. It's painting a picture of something that was hidden and tucked away in our brain, and we don't understand all the ramifications and all the implications behind that, but we can see the importance of exploring how much we are spiritual beings, and how much we are meant to be connected to God, and how much we benefit from that connection. Our mood improves. Some doctors talk about how people that have a faith based, how they heal faster than people that lack that spiritual connection, and how we can benefit by pushing that understanding to the forefront, and kind of discussing those things, and making people understand, or at least see the importance of those dynamics. I think that you
Yeah.
and I have spoken about theology and science as those two windows of our building, of our edifice, and I think that sometimes we just get so wrapped up in our semantics that we are speaking about the same thing. We're just using different words, and we cannot see past our semantical differences. And I think that that's what science does. We are looking at the same picture, but from two different angles of the building. Theology doesn't dispute science, and science doesn't dispute theology. We're speaking about the same God. We're speaking about the same creation. We're just describing it from two separate and distinct vintage points that come together to give us a wider appreciation and a deeper understanding of how God works in us, through us, and how He reveals Himself to us and through creation.
Oh, I love that. I honestly, we're pretty close to the end of the time. I think we could just leave it there. That's a great summary in some ways. So, the Reverend Doctor, I'm going to give you that second
Oh,
PhD
God.
already. The Reverend Doctor Edgardo Rosado, thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you for those who have been listening. It has really been a pleasure to talk with you. So, thank you for your insights.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity of sharing with you and having fun. It's been great.
All right, well,
Thank you.
keep the conversation going.
Amen.
For now, we're wrapping it up. So again, thanks for being part of this this conversation about science, race, faith, insights from Hispanic congregations.